Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well. So in this video we are going to be reviewing the recently released Brave New World, which is a utopian and dystopian look at society based on the classic novel by Aldous Huxley. Now there are definitely some WTF and sci-fi moments in this series, but at its core it's all about examining whether or not as a society at the moment we are working towards going to becoming this brave new world, and whether or not that is the right solution for us. There is also a struggle between happiness and freedom, and what happens when these two worlds kind of collide in a bit of a catastrophic event, which is really interesting in this series. Now this is going to be a spoiler review. I am going to be talking about things across the 9 episodes of this series, so if you haven't seen it yet, then definitely check it out and then come back to this video. Or if you don't mind things being spoilt, then definitely stick around, as we are going to be talking about all things to do with Brave New World. And in the comparison section, I will be comparing the series to the book as well, so definitely stick around if you want to check that section out too. Now the premise of this show is all about how humans have successfully created utopia by creating a caste system where everyone knows their role and everyone are really happy in their roles. They have also abolished privacy, monogamy, money, family and history, and everyone are connected on a system called Indra, and multiple times a day take a positivity and happiness drug called Soma. Now there are also humans within this world as well, but outside of the Brave New World called New London, humans do exist where they are kind of living in ruin, and they are called savages. Now I'm going to go through the main storyline strands from the 9 episodic series of Brave New World. So the first storyline strand was all about how the residents of Brave New World / New London kind of visit what they call the Savage Lands, which is where all of the humans live, and kind of put on plays for the entertainment of the guys from New London when they kind of visit. So they have created a kind of Disney theme park sort of event where they have like the House of Monogamy, the House of Consequence, etc., where the residents of Brave New World can kind of see what the old savage world used to be like. So they kind of visit this Disney park theme park, so to speak, and kind of see all of these different aspects of savage life. Now the savages don't really like this because they're kind of viewed as being in a bit of a fishbowl and kind of living like animals for the entertainment of the guys from New London. So kind of want to revolt against this and kind of want to destroy all of the people from New London when they come to visit. So that kind of ends up being a bit of a horror movie type situation where the guys from New London don't know how to cope with this and kind of have to survive, where they're kind of being hunted from all of these savages. So that was a really cool way to kind of start the show, which was really cool. The next storyline strand was all to do with Demi Moore's character, who was someone that lived in New London, but then kind of went to visit the Savage Lands one day, but then got abandoned by her group from New London and then kind of left, and she had to kind of become accustomed to Savage Land and kind of become one of them. So that was a really interesting character. And then she kind of had a baby, which was the main character of the show, which is John, and how she kind of raised him and has always kind of wanted to go back to New London. And then when she does get the opportunity, she kind of jumps to it and then kind of sees what happens when a savage goes back into the New London world. The next storyline strand is all about just that, whereby John, who's a character from the Savage Lands, kind of comes into New London and kind of explores what kind of happens when a character like that kind of ends up in this space. And that's really interesting in terms of, you know, his story arc over here is really cool, whereby at first he kind of rejects it, he doesn't want to entertain the idea, he doesn't really like it. And then he finds out from the caste system, he's actually right at the top of the caste system as an alpha, and kind of enjoys that kind of celebrity status and kind of having that space where he's at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, whereas when he was in the Savage Lands, he was right at the bottom. So that's a really nice exploration in terms of what happens when he kind of goes from the bottom right to the top, and what would happen in society when that happens to someone, which was really interesting. Then kind of explores how jealousy and all of these different kind of emotions lead to the Bernard character kind of pulling John down from his kind of fall from grace, so to speak. And then when he's kind of back at the bottom, he kind of gets a crew of other Epsilons, who are the other people at the bottom of the caste system, and kind of revolts again within this Brave New World space, and then kind of exploring what will happen when that sort of thing happens, whereby the people at the bottom of society kind of destroy everything, which is really interesting. The next storyline strand is all to do with the Bernard character. who went on an interesting story arc himself as well, whereby, you know, in the beginning he loves the caste system, loves kind of ensuring the social body is working really well, and kind of loves the space that he's in, and kind of wants everything to be really well controlled and for everyone to stay happy. But then when he kind of tastes a bit of savage land experience in terms of how they are all operating, then he's very confused and all of the emotions are conflicting within him. He's kind of feeling heartbreak and all of that sort of stuff, and kind of what happens when jealousy and all of these emotions kind of enter someone that hasn't necessarily experienced it before. The next storyline strand is a bit similar to the Bernard storyline, whereby a character from New London kind of goes to the Savage Lands, comes back, and has a different perspective, except this time the Lenina Crown character kind of does just that, but this time she becomes obsessed with Savage Land and becomes obsessed with freedom, and just kind of wants to strive towards that, and kind of questions whether or not this whole Brave New World is the right thing or the wrong thing, which is really, really interesting. The final episode, story arc, was just absolutely brilliant. You know, across all of the 9 episodes, they've built up this whole universe, this whole world, this whole characters, and in the final episode, they just totally explode it, and you kind of see the fallout from everything in terms of the destruction of Brave New World and New London, which is really, really interesting. And then the final storyline arc is all about the Soma drug and the place that that has within society in terms of keeping everyone calm, keeping everyone happy, kind of controlling everyone, and what happens when that resource kind of gets depleted, and how is everyone going to cope with this drug that they've become so addicted to but now is away from them. So that was really interesting. So, you know, all in all, I feel like Brave New World really explores super interesting themes, really things that, you know, whilst it may well seem like a whole sci-fi built universe, actually does have a lot of correlations with us as a society at the moment. So from that point of view, I thought it was super compelling. So I absolutely loved all of the cast and characters of this show. I thought they played their parts super, super well. Really, really engaging, really believable performances. And like I said before, really strong character arcs throughout the 9 episodic series, which is really, really cool. So let's go through them one by one. So first up, we have Alden, who played Han Solo in the Solo Star Wars movie, which is really, really cool. And he kind of plays the main character, John the Savage, in this show. You're kind of with this character throughout. You can kind of relate to this character the most, and he kind of leads the audience into this world, which is really, really interesting. You know, he really is relatable in the sense that, you know, he loves his mother. Kind of the losing his mother storyline was really compelling. The kind of emotional, raw kind of emotions that he's kind of experiencing was really believable, really relatable as well. And also kind of when he comes into the new world of New London, he kind of, at first, like I said before, is a bit reluctant, but then when he becomes an alpha, he kind of really embraces it, really enjoys it, kind of wants to have a bit of both, wants to have the happiness and wants to have the freedom. So he's trying to live a life where he's able to have both, and, you know, successfully does do that for a few episodes, but then has his massive fall from grace. And then when he does have that, he kind of goes back to his kind of savage ways, so to speak, and then ends up reluctantly again kind of destroying the entire Brave New World system. And I love the conversation that him and Bernard had right at the end, which was, you know, you are just basically destroying everything from episode 1 to episode 9. You have done so many things which have led to total destruction, and actually what have you achieved from that? Everything has now become destroyed, and really, is freedom worth it? So I thought that conversation between those two characters was really, really interesting. Next up, let's actually speak about the Bernard character, who was brilliantly played by Harry Lloyd, who we all know was playing Professor X in the short-lived Legion series, and here he plays Bernard, who is a bit of an alpha plus character, kind of loves his rank, loves kind of controlling the social body within New London, and kind of really loves his position. On the first episode, he sees someone commit suicide, and ever since that moment, he just begins to question everything and really tries to see whether or not this is the right position for him, and kind of has a lot of conflict in terms of, you know, was the savage way the right way, is how we live the right way, and then kind of battles that a little bit, but then ultimately kind of loves his position, loves New London, loves the whole world, and then really wants to kind of continue climbing the ranks, etc. He has a really nice friendship with John for a couple of episodes. I thought their little combination was a really interesting one in terms of somebody who's super well versed with the whole utopia society, and somebody who's super well versed with the savage ways, and actually how these two can actually have a friendship. Two people from very different worlds can actually be united, But then ultimately, I really liked the character arc in terms of jealousy just completely destroyed this character, and kind of similarly led to him having a bit of a fall from grace. You know, he was very jealous of the attention that John was getting, and then tried to get that attention for himself, tried anything and everything to kind of get that for himself, but wasn't as successful as how effortlessly it was happening for the John character. And then similarly was having a bit of jealousy with the love interest that John was experiencing as well. So it really nicely showed how jealousy just totally destroyed this character, which I thought was a really interesting character arc for Harry Lloyd's Bernard portrayal. We then have Jessica Findlay's brilliant portrayal as Lenina Crown, and like I said before, was a character who was relatively happy in New London, kind of went to the Savage Lands to kind of experience what that was like, and then just became totally obsessed with the whole savage way of living, the freedom that they have, and was always trying to really battle living in New London and wanting freedom, and just the kind of exploration in terms of whether or not those two can go hand in hand or not, and just the conflict that she has in terms of falling in love with John and kind of seeing whether or not a monogamous relationship can work within this whole Brave New World. So I feel like her character arc was really, really interesting, and Jessica Findlay just did a brilliant portrayal for the character, which was really, really cool. With Demi Moore, I really liked her character of Linda, somebody who was in New London, who went into the Savage Lands and then kind of came back. I thought it was a real shame that they kind of ultimately used her as a bit of a plot device to get John from going from the Savage Lands to New London. And you know, even in the book, Linda does kind of re-explore the whole New London space, so it would have been nice to kind of see that a bit more. But you know, I guess ultimately she did really help the John character along with his storyline arc. We then have Mustafa Mon's character, who kind of created New London, created this Brave New World by creating the whole intra system, which is what everyone's connected to, and then kind of battles whether or not this was the right thing and whether or not this should be switched off, whether or not everyone can and should continue, whether or not everyone can and will survive in this world. So I thought her character arc was really interesting in terms of battling whether or not this whole utopia society is the right thing or not. And then finally we have the Henry Foster character, who was somewhat the antagonist for a couple of episodes in this series, very arrogant, and I feel like his character was really embodying the type of character who is right at the top of the caste system in society and kind of looks down at everyone else, kind of enjoys that power and just kind of wants to kind of really be able to abuse it as well. So I thought all of the characters, all of the different representations of society within this whole world was really, really cool. So from a character's point of view, I feel like this show is super strong. So in terms of the visuals for Brave New World, I feel like they are honestly just excellent. You know, they are creating this whole utopia society where the audience really have to come into this whole new world, no pun intended. And I feel like from a visuals point of view, they did a really good job in terms of really creating this immersive experience of Brave New World, of New London, where you're really with these characters, you're kind of living this whole new way of life through all of these different characters, the way that they kind of work, the way that they have their pleasure, the way that they kind of operate, the way that the whole caste system works, all of that kind of stuff. You're really with these characters in this whole new world, which I thought was really, really cool. Similarly, I feel like the Savage Lands was created really, really well. I love how they had like a bus tour operator going around seeing all of these different characters as savages in the exact same way that, you know, on a safari tour, people are kind of looking at animals. So I just loved the kind of comparisons that they had over there as well. And just the first few episodes, like I said before, really did feel like a horror movie in terms of these New London characters being in the Savage Lands and how they're going to be able to survive here, and not only survive but get back home. So I love those few episodes in terms of the real horror movie aspect of the show. But like I said before, all in all, the visuals for this show are brilliant. In terms of comparisons, you know, the concept of utopia has been done before. You know, we've seen it done a lot actually in movies such as The Giver, Equilibrium, Tomorrowland, etc. I guess Brave New World, how it's a little bit different is the fact that you're kind of being able to see it being spread out across 9 episodes in a TV series format. So from that point of view, you know, whilst the concept is similar, the execution is very different. In terms of comparing it to the book, they did make some changes, but they did equally keep a lot of the things the same. And the changes that they did make, for the most part, I was okay with. Like I said before, I was a little bit disappointed at the fact that the Demi Moore Linda character didn't survive a bit longer. I understand, like I said before, why they did that, because she was just a bit of a plot device to help John come across from the Savage Lands to the New London world. So I wish they kind of kept that the same from the book and kind of had the Linda character kind of readjusting and re-exploring life back in New London, because I thought that could have been really interesting. But you know, for the most part, I feel like that was done really, really well. And there were two more changes that they made from the book to the series as well. The first one is that the savages in the book are very ritualistic, very cult-like, whereas in the series they kind of humanize them a little bit more, which I thought was actually a good change, because you can kind of relate to the savages a little bit more. And obviously at the end of the book, the John character kind of kills himself, whereas he's alive at the end of this series. And I kind of like the fact that they kept him alive. Obviously if there is a season 2, then we can kind of explore this character a bit further. But I also liked how they had him on his own right at the end. So you don't know whether he may well or may not commit suicide right at the end, but they really did show that all of the destruction that he caused for New London, was it right, was it wrong, because now ultimately he is on his own. So I thought that was really interesting. There are also loads of comparisons that you can make from Brave New World and society at large right now. So for example, the first one is, you know, totally being able to have sex with anyone that you want is kind of available right now through the Tinder app, which I thought was an interesting comparison. The next one is in terms of how everyone is kind of being controlled by this soma drug and kind of being happy through it. Is that kind of like coffee? Is coffee the soma drug equivalent? Or something a bit more philosophical, is the internet the kind of equivalent to soma? That's kind of like the addiction that you're getting to kind of be happy. Is that kind of like the equivalent? And then the third one is all about how everyone is always connected, everyone knows everyone else's business, there's no privacy and everything is very open book, which I think you can kind of compare to social media. So I absolutely love all of the comparisons that you can make in terms of the show and how actually it's not that far-fetched, because actually there are some aspects that we are living and experiencing as a society today. So by the end of Brave New World, it does kind of end on a bit of a cliffhanger that you're kind of thinking, is this going to continue? And if it does, here are my predictions for season 2. So there is a second book, which is what this whole show is kind of based upon. And in that book, there is based on the island, which is kind of like a hybrid between Savage Land and this Brave New World of New London. So I feel like, you know, the Bernard character may kind of have a bit of a dual combination with the Queen of the Savage Lands to kind of set up the island. You know, there was that mysterious box that we don't really know what was inside of it, but maybe that was Indra, maybe that was the brain behind this whole Brave New World, which they are going to try to re-establish in season 2. I feel like we're going to see the return of the Linda character. Maybe they can bring all of these characters back. Maybe that will kind of be an exploration of a storyline theme. I feel like John will kind of be the opposite of what he was like in this series, and in the next season be actually striving for happiness, and maybe him and Bernard can kind of help create this whole new happy world. And I feel like the Lenina Crown character, because she was striving for freedom so much, I feel like she now has her freedom. She was smiling at the end of the first season, and maybe when she comes back in season 2, she will actually see that freedom isn't all that it cracked up to be. So I feel like that would be a really interesting storyline arc in terms of how she and John are now wanting to have happiness again. So I feel like season 2 has so much potential, and I cannot wait to see where this season and series goes next. Overall, I'm sure you can tell I really enjoyed Brave New World. I thought it was a great series. I loved escaping into New London and kind of seeing this whole new world and seeing what life is like within this whole new sci-fi space. I feel like 9 episodes could have been a little bit too much for this series. I feel like they could have cut it down to maybe 8, because a couple of the episode storylines were a little bit repeated. But you know, all in all, I feel like the character arcs and character journeys that everyone went on was really compelling. Kind of seeing this whole new world kind of coming to life was really cool. I remember the first episode, I was thinking, what on earth is this? But then I really quickly escaped into this world, loved the horror movie storylines right in the beginning, and I just loved, as I said before, all of the different storyline arcs from all of the different characters, all the different worlds, kind of experiencing whether or not something is right, whether or not something is wrong, and the questions right at the end as well, you know, in terms of flipping whether or not you can kind of think that everything that you thought was wrong maybe wasn't so bad, and kind of really questioning whether or not the way that society is moving, is that right, is that wrong? Is happiness the thing that we should be all sorting after? Is freedom the thing that we're all sorting after? So I just feel like it asks brilliant moral questions, and just the execution of this storyline, of the characters, of the whole world was really compelling and really thought-provoking. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Brave New World a solid 7 out of 10. I'd love to hear what you think, so please let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.